We're talking Tennessee Titans football on the Ourlads Football Network here at Ourlads Football YouTube Channel. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in. And when we're talking Tennessee Titans football, that means we're bringing him back again, Tyler Rowland. Tyler, how's it going?
I'm doing very good, Greg. Thanks for having me on. Football is here. It feels good. I can't wait to see some more action this weekend, and obviously as we make our way to the regular season.
Yeah, you can check out Tyler. He's got the Locked On Titans podcast, and I'm assuming you can get that streamed or on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Tyler.
Yeah, it's everywhere, basically.
Yeah, it's the way it is now. Real easy to make that convenient for everybody to check out audio, video, and all that kind of cool stuff. So, and you can check out our conversation that we had right around draft time. That, of course, is still available on demand, either here on the Ourlads channel, or you could check out my channel at Prime Sports Network. Okay, so let's talk about the preseason game. I know a lot of starters didn't play, but some did, and there was some action. So what was the good that came out of that first preseason game?
Well, I think the number one thing that stands out is the offense went 2 for 2. I mean, it wasn't beautiful. They got a little bit of help from some special teams returns that put them in good position. Like the very first drive of the game, they had a 63-yard kickoff return and then a 15-yard penalty immediately. So the offense was in great position. It was still a little ugly on that first drive, even with the great field position, but they did get that in for a touchdown with Will Levis quarterback sneaking. And then the next drive, they did march it down the field and get another touchdown. So I know it's preseason. San Francisco didn't have all of their starters out there on defense, of course, but for a new offensive system led by Brian Callahan, Will Levis going into year 2, all the new pieces on the offense, that's what you wanted to see. You wanted to see success, and they scored 2 touchdowns on their 2 drives. You can't really complain about that. The offensive line really stood out. The offensive line had, if you go individually, I just did a film breakdown on my film channel at Tic Tac Titans on YouTube as well, breaking down the performance of the offensive line in those 2 drives. And there were individual moments of lapse, I guess you could say. But overall, the offensive line, which is maybe the biggest question mark for the Titans going into the season, they performed pretty well. And again, it's early, a lot of new faces, a lot of young guys, new offensive system. But having success, stacking performances, I think that's going to be good for them as they go throughout the rest of the season and get ready for the regular season. So pretty excited about what the first team offense was able to do for the Titans.
Yeah, let's go ahead and might as well use this time to pop up the Ourlads depth chart for Tennessee. So this is what we have. And you're talking about that offensive line. Latham, of course, being the first-round draft pick. Skoronski from last year, the big free agency addition, and Cushenberry at center. Yep. And Radens is a kid that also is at the point in time, and maybe even Petit Frere, that these are guys on that right side that really need to step it up, because it looks like from center left, they're going to be in pretty good shape. So overall, how has the line looked during camp at this point, and definitely on that right side?
Well, I think there's been some struggles, and I think most of those struggles have been on the right side. Now, one thing that we have to take into account is the Titans do have a pretty talented front 4 on defense. Jeffrey Simmons is one of the top 3 interior defensive linemen in the NFL, in my opinion. Harold Landry may not be an elite tier pass rusher like the Myles Garrett's and TJ Watts and Nick Bosa's of the world, but he is a very good NFL rusher. And then T'Vondre Sweat, with having so much attention on those other 2 I just mentioned, Sweat has made some good plays in camp as well. So I think the Titans' defensive line can be a little bit of a handful. And when you're looking at a right side of the offensive line with Dylan Radens and Nicholas Petit Frere, no matter how well they perform, even if they perform well, these aren't elite starting offensive linemen on the right-hand side. Like, you're just hoping for league average play from the right side of the offensive line. So there have been ups and downs, but Nicholas Petit Frere, the Titans' right tackle, missed basically all of the summer workouts. He just got back last week on Friday, not even been a week, and he's already been out there playing, trying to get caught up to speed. Bill Callahan, the Titans' offensive line coach, even said, he's behind on everything. He's trying to catch up. He's trying to cram everything that they've been working on all summer because he was injured. He wasn't able to participate. So I think there's going to be a lot of growth from the Titans offensive line, but obviously the big question mark on that offense, just looking at the depth chart would tell you that, is, can those guys hold up their end of the bargain? The Titans had Sadiq Charles set to be the starter at right guard, and he surprisingly retired last week, just out of nowhere, unexpected. And we even had an assistant coach on Tuesday say, yeah, I called him and he just never called me back. So he retired in the middle of training camp and ghosted all his coaches as to why and what was going on. So that's obviously going to throw a wrench into things. But I think Dylan Radins is a capable player, and he's going into a make-or-break season for him in his final year of his rookie contract. So it's now or never. So while the Titans' offensive line, I'm not expecting elite play, I think as this young group, grows together throughout the next few weeks, they can definitely be league average. And if you've been watching the Tennessee Titans the last few years, having a league average offensive line is like finding water in the desert. So,
and you couldn't have asked for a better line coach as well.
Correct.
And having Bill Callahan. Yep. And so, and matter of fact, when we last spoke, you talked about the trade for Leroy Watson. Of course, he came over in a deal with Cleveland. So Callahan must like about this kid. So is there any, as far as the rest of the bench and some of the guys that, of course, are fighting for that final roster spot, are there any guys that we should be keeping an eye on? I mean, Duncan is a draft pick even just from last year.
Yeah. I mean, Leroy Watson is a little banged up right now. He's expected to be back at practice this week, but he missed the preseason game. And I think he's fallen by the wayside. And I think one of the realities here is the Titans went out and got Garon Christian, who is their backup left tackle, as you can see on the screen here with the depth chart. And Christian was another guy who was in Cleveland last year with Bill Callahan and was actually ahead of Leroy Watson on the depth chart. I think the Titans traded a 7th-round pick for Leroy Watson because, hey, we're going to take a chance and develop him. It's a 7th-round pick. What are the odds we're going to get somebody more intriguing with that 7th-round pick in the draft? We'll just go ahead and get Watson. But I think the Titans bringing in Garon Christian kind of signals, hey, maybe Watson isn't holding up his end of the bargain. On the other side, John Ojukwu is a guy that was a starter at times until Nicholas Petit-Frere came back. I don't think he's going to be a starter, but he's definitely had good moments in camp. And on the interior, the name I really want to point out, it's actually a project that I'm working on right now, breaking down some of the tape from Saturday night, is Andrew Rupcich. Andrew Rupcich was a free agent, undrafted free agent in 2022. He was one of the most decorated D3 offensive linemen in college football history. I mean, the guy was incredible at low-level college football. He gets picked up by the Titans as an undrafted guy, works a little tackle, gets moved into guard. He played on Saturday night with the second string, and he was absolutely phenomenal. The highest-graded offensive lineman in the game per Pro Football Focus on 30 snaps had an 87 grade. So he was pretty good. And will that translate to first string? We don't know, but I think that Andrew Rupcich is a guy who is pushing Dylan Radins, and you could see Andrew Rupcich as a guy who makes it into the starting lineup for the Titans at some point during the season. So, again, I'm not talking about them finding some gem, some elite player who's going to come in and be a Pro Bowl level player, but if the Titans can just get league average play from the right side and then good play from the center to the left tackle spot, they're going to be massively improved up front.
Taking a look at, well, you mentioned Levis. So had his moments in the preseason game. How has this offseason been for him now that he's the man?
I think it's going great for him, honestly. I don't have any reason to believe that anything negative has happened. He's really kicked up his leadership role. Last year, you come in, you're the third-string quarterback because Mike Vrabel is a caveman who doesn't believe in giving rookies a fair shot, puts him behind Malik Willis, which is just laughable to think about right now that Malik Willis was the second-string quarterback for 6 weeks of the season. What a terrible job by Mike Vrabel to put his team in that position. Playing the best quarterback on the team is third string, and the emergency quarterback just absolutely silly old man caveman stuff from Mike Vrabel, which is why I totally disagreed with the national reaction that it was a mistake to let him go. It was a great move to let Mike Vrabel go. But Levis has taken advantage, knowing that he's the guy. He's had a leadership role. He took a lot of his wide receivers to Cabo for a week during the summer. He's been in the building. He's leading, and that's a little bit different than being a rookie last year, knowing that you're the guy, knowing your first string, just gives you a little more room to be yourself. He's really got to work on going through his progressions quickly, getting the ball out quick, not always looking to make that deep play down the field. Of course, he has great arm strength, absolutely great arm strength. I think Dan Orlovsky from ESPN recently put Levis in the top 6 in the NFL in arm strength. I think he might even be higher than that, if I'm honest with you. But he's got all the natural talent and he's got the intangibles that you want, but you got to have the mental processing speed to get through what you're looking at out there, get the ball to the right spot. And in the preseason game on Saturday night, Levis showed that he has improved in that way. He got through his progressions pretty quickly, was hitting the check down for good gains. You don't have to make the big play every time. Sometimes, what's the saying? You're never going broke taking profit. So Levis needs to keep that in his mind and calibrating when to take the shot and when to just check it down and take your profit. That's going to be an ongoing thing for him throughout his second year, but I don't think you could be anything but impressed with Will Levis. And if you saw that commercial on Tuesday for his new Mayo perfume from Hellman's, you would see clearly he's taking things up a notch this offseason. So excited to see that.
Yeah, and of course he's got a new coordinator too, a new quarterback coach. So it's never easy, but that seems to be working out really well at this point. And look, this is really because right now the franchise with a second-year GM and a first-year head coach, it's a rebuilding job right now. And but against the NFL, and everybody wants these rebuilding projects to go a little bit faster if they can. But overall, and we're going to get into it, but just on this point, it seems to me that Tennessee has the roster to be really either, especially in this division, either a last place team or a team that if Levis turns into a really qualified quarterback in this league in 2024, to a team that is battling for possibly first place. So that's the kind of talent they seem to have. Do you kind of feel that way, that it could either be a really long season or a really fun season?
Yeah, if I'm honest with you, I see their kind of range is like 7 to 10 wins. I don't know that they're good enough to be better than 10 wins. I think that would take a lot of things going, like basically everything that they've done this offseason going right is what that would take. 7 wins, I think a lot of things would have to go wrong. I don't see the Titans losing less or losing more than 10 games, because last year they went 6-11. I just have a hard time believing they'll be as bad as they were last year with all the improvements they made. But the problem is, like you mentioned, there are some big dominoes that will decide which way they go. I think that Will Levis is obviously the biggest one. He's an X factor. If he does not take a step forward, he makes some of the mistakes he made last year, then they'll probably be on the low end of that win total. But if he does ascend and he becomes the version of the quarterback that Titans fans are hoping that he can be, then they could hit that 10-win area. I think J.C. Latham, who we talked about before at left tackle, that's another big X factor. If Latham comes out and really struggles as a rookie at left tackle, it might be more of the same for what the Titans have seen in the last few years with Dennis Daly in 2022, and then Andre Dillard and company and Jalen Duncan and stuff at left tackle last season. So if the Titans don't get better left tackle play and Levis doesn't take a step forward, I don't think they're going to be able to be fighting for a playoff spot. You know what I mean? And then the flip side, on the defense, you got a guy like Tavondre Sweat, who's a rookie who is already a starter on the depth chart. He's already a guy who's expected to make impact plays. And, you know, he's a rookie. He didn't look absolutely great in that game on Saturday night. It was his first action. He didn't have Simmons next to him and Landry next to him like he normally does. But the Tavondre Sweat experience and what that looks like, can the Titans stop the run in nickel? Can they get penetration with Sweat on the field as a pass rusher? I think those 3 players are going to have a major impact on what this Tennessee Titans football team will ultimately be able to accomplish.
All right, let's take a look at those skill position players on offense. And Hopkins, even though he's out right now, do you think he'll be back week 1?
Yeah, I think when the injury happened, the timeline was 4 to 6 weeks or something like that, and it was about 5 weeks away from the regular season. So unless DeAndre Hopkins has like a setback that leaves him on the long end of that timeline, I think he'll be back and ready to go. Even if he were to miss a game or 2, I think the Titans could withstand that. I mean, one of the big things for Titans fans this offseason that people have been excited about is how the wide receiver room is totally different. You look last year, before Hopkins was signed, you got Treylon Burks, Nick Westbrook-Akine, and Kyle Phillips as your starting wide receivers. I mean, that is right up there with the Giants as the worst wide receiver group in the NFL. Well, now you have Hopkins, you have Ridley, You have Tyler Boyd, and then you have Treylon Burks as a backup guy. I think the Titans have the depth and the talent at wide receiver this year to withstand a Hopkins absence for a couple of weeks. Now, they couldn't do it a whole season. They need DeAndre Hopkins, but a couple of weeks, I think they could survive in that way. Treylon Burks definitely needs to step up, though, and this is his opportunity to do it. But the depth at wide receiver and the talent at wide receiver is something that's one of the biggest breaths of fresh air for me as someone who not only covers the team, but is a Titans fan and has been for a quarter of a century now. Like, this is probably the most talented wide receiver room the Titans have ever had since I've been a fan. So I think it's very exciting from that standpoint, and they have the talent to withstand the absence of Hopkins. But realistically, I don't think he's going to miss much regular season time, and that's the expectation right now.
All right. Speaking of Burks, we know this is a very important season for him. So how's his offseason been so far with the new staff? And then they did draft someone as well in round 6. So how is that battle for the final spot at wide receiver going to look? I would assume as long as Burks is healthy and showing some sort of strides that he's going to be fine. But how has he been?
Well, I mean, all indications out of camp are that Treylon Burks is doing just fine. Now, I wouldn't say that he's been spectacular. Like, we haven't heard a lot of, oh, Burks is making this play, Burks is making all these plays. Yeah. You know, he's doing he's just kind of been out there, but he looks to be in much better shape than he's been in the last 2 years. I've been kind of critical of his commitment to football. He doesn't really seem like a guy who loves football like other people do. He hasn't, it's funny because in previous years, his first 2 seasons, you'd argue, hey, he doesn't look like he's in great shape. And the coaches will tell you he's in good shape. And, fans who are more on the homer side of things will argue with you and tell you he's in shape. And then year 3, they say, oh, he's totally changed his body. He's in the best shape of his life. Yeah. So wait, were you lying to us the last 2 years? How does that work? He can't. Last year you said that too. So that can't be true. So, you hear the classic all-season trope of he's in the best shape of his life. He does look like he is in great shape, though. As somebody who's covered him for the first 2 years of his career, he looks like he's in better shape. But ultimately, I think at wide receiver, if you're going to be a player, it doesn't take you until year 3 to show it. So I'm not expecting a big year from Treylon Burks. I think he's he reminds me a lot of like Corey Davis for the Titans. Okay. Drafted in the first round, overdrafted for sure. But Corey Davis has never been a game changer or a big playmaker. He's kind of just your average wide receiver in the NFL, and I don't think Burks is special in any way, but he could just be an average, low-end starting wide receiver in the NFL, make a career out of that. But in camp, they've said good things, but we have not heard anything to make us think that Treylon Burks is breaking out this year in any way. I honestly think if the Titans have the opportunity once Hopkins is healthy and a team has injuries at the position, I think they should trade Treylon Burks if they can get a good deal for him. But if they don't get a good deal, like a 3rd or a 4th round pick, then just keep him for depth purposes. But I guess I'm just kind of, you got to prove it to me, Treylon Burks. I have refused to get on the Treylon Burks hype train. I just don't think he has the body control or the balance to be an elite receiver in the NFL. He's kind of like it's like a baby deer. They're so long and they're so wide and they just kind of gallop around and almost look like they're about to fall down all the time. That's how Burks looks out there. He looks like he's about to fall down. He doesn't have great body control. Doesn't look like he fits well with the speed of the NFL game. And maybe all of that changes and I'll be wrong about it. But I was already wrong once from believing in him when he was drafted. I'm not gonna fall for it again. So he's gonna have to prove it to me.
I'm sure Burks and the team would really like it if he could become Corey Davis, to tell you the truth at this point in time.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, all right. What about Jackson and who's going to be fighting for that final spot in this unit?
Well, I think the top 5 is locked in. I think Hopkins, Ridley, Boyd, Burks, and Nick Westbrook-Akine, who your average NFL fan who isn't a Titans fan may not know much about, but he's just that classic utility wide receiver, undrafted free agent out of Indiana, been on the team for 4 years now. He blocks. He always knows where to go. He knows the playbook. Like, he is just your classic depth wide receiver. Now, the problem is the Titans have had to use him as a starter in the last few years, which is never where you want to be, quite honestly. But there's a joke in the Titans community that everyone calls him NWI, Nick Westbrook-Akine, and the I stands for inevitable because you just can't get rid of him, and he's always going to be out there on the field. So I think those 5 guys are locked in. the question does become, and this is one of the big questions, will the Titans keep 6 or 7 wide receivers? I personally would like to see them keep 6 and keep an extra tight end, or keep a 9th offensive lineman, or keep a 4th running back, or keep Malik Willis as the 3rd quarterback. I would prefer those, because Kyle Phillips, who was drafted in the 5th round in 2022, but has been a major disappointment in this first 2 years, he's the best wide receiver of the guys fighting for that 6th spot, but he can give you no value on special teams because he has the yips with punt returns. He started dropping punt returns in his rookie year. He didn't get opportunities his 2nd year, and he dropped 2 punts in warmups on Saturday. So he has the yips as a punt returner, which is something he did well in college. And if you don't provide that value as a wide receiver 6, it's going to be hard to keep you. Yeah. Now, on the flip side, Jaquan Jackson, the rookie out of Tulane, brought back a punt for 26 yards on Saturday night and looked fantastic. Has more speed than Kyle Phillips. Is more of a deep threat out of the slot than Kyle Phillips. And then Kearis Jackson, who was an undrafted free agent out of Georgia from last year, he brought back the opening kickoff 63 yards. So whereas Kyle Phillips is the better wide receiver, he does not provide the special teams value that a Kearis Jackson and a Jaquan Jackson do. So I think it's going to be hard for Kyle Phillips to hold on to that spot. Because, again, you're wide receiver 6. Yeah. You have to add value on special teams. Yep. And Kyle Phillips just simply does not. So if they keep 7, I would say it's probably Phillips and Jaquan Jackson. But if they only keep 6, I don't think it's going to be Kyle Phillips. And I think it'll be between Kearis Jackson and Jaquan Jackson, which I think Jaquan Jackson, the guy who was drafted this year, ultimately would win out that battle.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. And then tight end, Okonkwo and Wiley. So those are your 2. I know we talked around draft time that they could have used a blocking tight end. Yeah. I'm not sure Nick Vanette is the guy, but you tell me, is that something they still need? And how does that unit look?
Well, I think Nick Vanette is that tight end 3 blocker type guy. Right. I don't think the Titans are going to be, the Titans are going to have a lot of 3 wide receiver looks. I think they will mix in some 2 tight end stuff, of course, because they want to get, some of their tight ends on the field as weapons, and it gives you versatility in your formation. But I think Nick Vanette can fill that, 3rd tight end, be out there, be a blocker, stuff like that. I think he can do that. Really, what I think is the conversation at tight end is I think Josh Wiley actually becomes the starter and plays the most reps this year. I think Okonkwo is the more talented pass catcher, but Josh Wiley is a more versatile guy. So I just mentioned the Titans are going to play a lot more 3 wide receiver this year. And when you play a 3 wide receiver formation, you need your tight end out there to be a guy that can put his hand in the dirt next to the offensive line and block. And the reality is Okonkwo is a small, undersized tight end with good speed. He's kind of a tweener between a wide receiver and a tight end. And Josh Wiley is a much bigger, much stronger guy. So I think Josh Wiley, the rookie out of Cincinnati from last year, will actually jump over Okonkwo in terms of reps and production, because he just fits the offense better as more of a traditional wide tight end where he can put his hand in the dirt. And when you think of tight ends, Josh Wiley is more of your traditional tight end, where Okonkwo is more of that move tight end. And I think the Titans will use them both, but I think Wiley will get the majority of the reps.
All right, that sounds good. And then at running back, Pollard is in, and Spears. Haskins is the number 3. You talked about how well he's played on special teams. So not sure if they're going 4 or 3. Looks like that's definitely locked in there. What do you think? And this is also going to kind of wrap up the offense. Fantasy, this is something I want to talk to you too about is, first of all, just for the Titans' sake, how do you think it's going to look, Spears and Pollard? Do you think it could be like a 50-50 type of split? And then before we move on to the defense, give us a little take on some players that you think, some fantasy fans out there that are watching, who should they be zeroing in on?
Well, I personally play in some deeper leagues. Both of the leagues that I play in every year are 14 teams. Okay. So to me, Spears and Pollard are both RB2s from that stance. I think if you're in a smaller league, like 8 to 10 players, I think they're bench options for you, maybe flex considerations. But if you're in a 12-team to 14-team league, I think that Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears are startable players. I think that they're going to rotate them. And Brian Callahan actually talked about this recently. He said he's got certain plays that he wants to use each guy in. So it's like, hey, we're going to run this I want Tajay in on that one. Hey, we're going to run this. I want Pollard in on that one. A lot of games, they're just going to ride the hot hand too because their skill sets are so similar. But I think from a fantasy perspective, both of those guys are viable options, and you could probably get good value on them because anyone who really believed in Tajay Spears is probably a little, sullied by the fact that they brought in Tony Pollard. They're probably like, oh no, they brought in Pollard. And people may overrate how much of an impact those things have. I think both of them are viable players. But when it comes to fantasy, I think the best fantasy player that you can draft from the Titans is Calvin Ridley. I think that Calvin Ridley and Will Levis are going to have a very special connection. I think Will Levis's arm strength with Calvin Ridley's speed is a perfect fit. And I think even Levis hitting him on some underneath things and letting him do some run after catch stuff, I think that'll be huge. We saw it 3rd and 10 for the Titans on Saturday night on their second touchdown drive. Calvin Ridley runs a short drag route, stops in the middle of the field. Levis hits him about 8 yards. Ridley makes a couple guys miss, uses his speed to get to the sideline, turns into an explosive 22-yard play. So I think Ridley's skill set with Will Levis's skill set and what they paid Ridley and how they see him in this offense, I think Calvin Ridley is definitely the best fantasy option for Titans. And if you are in a deep league or maybe even a dynasty league, I think Josh Wiley would be a good consideration as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you think Wiley, it's possible he could have a breakout season.
Yeah, in a sense. I mean, it's all about perspective. Last year, he did little to nothing in his rookie year. So a breakout season to me for Josh Wiley could be 500 yards and 3 touchdowns with, 40 catches. But I definitely think he's capable of doing that, and he's going to be out on the field, and the Titans are going to look to dump it off. They don't want Levis holding that ball and taking sacks. And I think dumping it off to the tight end, dumping it off to the running backs, that's going to make all of them fantasy viable. Again, in deeper leagues, they're going to be better for you. But the running back specifically, I think you got to draft them even if you're in a smaller league.
By the way, if something were to happen to Spears or Pollard for even just a short period of time, and one of them is on the field for a game or several games, do they become the bell cow? Or do you think based on the way the offense is, they would just move, say, Haskins in, and now he has to maybe do a 60-40 split or a 70-30 split?
I think that if one of the 2 running backs got hurt, it would go more like 70-30.
Okay.
I think that they would just feed whichever running back didn't get hurt more. I think Haskins, we've talked about this. Haskins to me is more of a special teams player than a running back. He doesn't have a lot of juice or wiggle as a runner. So I think in the event that one of the top 2 guys got hurt, they would just bring Julius Chestnut in and be the guy. Like Haskins would probably just stay on the depth chart as RB3, and then Chestnut would jump him to RB2 and because Chestnut is a much better runner of the ball. But I think when you have Spears and Pollard, you would rather have a Haskins as your RB3 for more versatility and variety than you would a Chestnut who's a better runner. So but I'll be honest, from a fantasy perspective, it wouldn't matter. Haskins and Chestnut aren't worth having on your roster, period. It would just be a situation where the running back that didn't get hurt now has much increased value and be somebody that you would probably want to go trade for or something if maybe the owner of them wasn't smart enough to realize what happened.
And I'm sure the fans, you were just talking about Spears with Pollard coming in. I'm sure the fans, they like their own. Spears is their guy. And the kid does have a lot of talent. And you just do wonder, look, this is going to be a great opportunity for him with Henry not here. But whether he gets a 50-50 split or not, he's basically going to get his shot. This is going to be his opportunity. Right. And it's not that bad that you get a little bit of a break here and there, because that's supposed to keep you a little bit healthier, not only for this year,
that's the way it works,
but for the years to come. Yep.
That's the way it's done now, and that's the way it should be done. Running back by committee, you know what I mean? And one of the big things for me is I'm excited to see the Titans get away from that bell cow back that you only get max value out if you give him 20 carries, and you can't run everything in your playbook with him in the backfield because he doesn't have the skill set. Like, the Titans have 2 good running backs that can both do the same things. So now every play in the playbook is always available no matter who's out there at running back. I know that a lot of Titans fans don't like hearing it, but I was ready to move on from Derrick Henry and move to this style of offense and this approach at running back.
I don't know. Do you know Christian?
Yeah. How's it going, Christian? Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I figured that. Oh, it's Martin Truex fan, huh? He must not have been very happy with what happened on Sunday night then. Okay.
Hey, I know my football, but I'll admit I don't know much about NASCAR. So
I do. So he knows what I'm talking about. All right. Anyway,
there you go.
it's been a rough year for Truex. Okay. So let's talk defense. And you mentioned Sweat. And of course, Simmons is the man. We know that.
Right.
Joseph Day was brought in. How deep do they go into this three-man front? Do the top three guys play a lot? And is there anybody that behind that, just top three guys that we should be keeping an eye on?
Well, the Titans said that they generally only want to play their defensive linemen about 5 to 6 snaps in a row before getting them a break because they want to keep them fresh. But I will tell you that this is one of the big areas of concern for me with the Titans roster. I am not enthused by the backup defensive line. I don't think that a lot of these names that you're seeing, Marlon Davidson, TK McClendon, Quentin Bohanna, even Keandre Coburn, I would have included in that before the game on Saturday. I don't think that any of those dudes are absolutely NFL players. I think a lot of them are practice squad level players. And I think Titans defensive line coach Tracy Rocker actually talked on Tuesday morning about, he didn't say anything bad, but he said, hey, we got what we got. You'd like more depth, of course, but we got what we got, and we're going to make it work. And he didn't make it sound as bad as I made it sound. But if you read between the lines, he's telling you, he came over from Philly. They had some of the best interior defensive line depth in the NFL. Coming over here and seeing the depth for the Titans, it's just not there. But the Titans couldn't fix every spot on the roster in one offseason here. So there has to be some holes. And I think depth on the interior defensive line is poor. But Keandre Coburn, who was actually a teammate with T'Vondre Sweat at Texas in college, he had a very impressive game on Saturday night with the second string and the third string defensive line. So I think Keandre Coburn has a good chance to stick throughout the season, but teams are always going to churn the back end of their roster as camp cuts start happening. And I could see the Titans bringing in some new blood on the interior defensive line once other teams start cutting players that they simply don't have the room to keep. So that's one area that I'm not very excited about. And I think that they should look to add some players there as they start to churn the roster.
All right. Then we take a look at the pass rush. And so a little bit of a hit with Key suspended.
Right.
That moves Rashad Weaver up. And just overall.
Which still hasn't been announced, by the way. The Key suspension has not become official yet. It was reported by Paul Kaharski, who's a local reporter for the Titans. And Titans coach Brian Callahan said they expect him to miss time. But that happened 2 or 3 weeks ago that news broke. And the NFL has still not confirmed that suspension. So kind of waiting to see what's happening. Is he appealing behind the scenes to get a reduction? Obviously things are in flux with that. But I'll come out and be honest with you. I'm not very enamored by Arden Key anyways. I don't think he's a starter in the NFL. So I can leave that there and let you continue with how you want to pose this question. But, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Arden Key.
Yeah, it looks like, and we talked about this, the pass rush, as you mentioned, you can't fix it all in one off season. And this is clearly one of those areas as well, because Weaver, he basically had one season where he had 5.5 sacks. He didn't do it in his rookie season, didn't have any last year. And now his snap count looks like it may have to go up. Is there anybody else past Landry? I should even say past Landry, but again, Weaver has some experience, so I'll throw him in there. Is there anybody past Landry and Weaver that offers any hope?
Yes, Jalen Harrell. So Jalen Harrell was the Titans' 7th-round pick out of Michigan. He's had an impressive camp. Brian Callahan called his camp excellent last week. He's a guy who really needs to develop more pass rush moves, but the Titans are going to want to be very versatile with their outside linebackers, which I think is a good move. And Harrell has the ability to drop into coverage. He did some good things in coverage on his drops on Saturday night. He's a guy who plays with great hustle, and Jim Harbaugh called him the heartbeat of the Michigan defense last year. And I don't mean to overrate some of this, intangible stuff, but Michigan's defense was one of the best college defenses we've ever seen. And if this guy was the heartbeat of that, at minimum, he's somebody is going to work hard to get better. He's going to know what his assignment is. He's going to execute as best that he can. And he's shown a little bit of pop in training camp so far. So I think Jalen Harrell, the 7th-round rookie out of Michigan, is a guy who honestly, if I could rework the depth chart, Harrell should be directly behind Harold Landry as the backup. Harrell has already jumped over Caleb Murphy and jumped over Shane Ray as that fourth edge rusher. And I think that he will continue to jump and be ahead of Rashad Weaver. He was ahead of Rashad Weaver on Saturday night. Jalen Harrell was the starting edge across from Arden Key in the preseason game, not Rashad Weaver. So that's bad news for Rashad Weaver in his fourth year of his rookie contract. It's disappointing, but Jalen Harrell is a guy who he's got to refine his pass rush ability. He doesn't have a lot of good pass rush moves to win in that way, but he's going to be good against the run. He's going to be able to drop into coverage. He's going to be a guy who factors on special teams for the Titans as well. So Jalen Harrell gives me some hope, but I'm not going to go far enough to say, oh, this pass rush is good. This pass rush, the opposite edge rusher spot from Harold Landry is in disarray. And the only thing that I will say is we talked about the interior D-line. We talked about the edge rushers. Well, this next draft class coming out next year in 2025, loaded at pass rusher and on the interior defensive line. And I think the Titans knew that. So they spent other places and attacked other places knowing, hey, we can't fix it all this offseason. Let's wait for the D-line and the edge for next year when the draft class is loaded with talent at those spots.
All right. So look at here.
That's not actually Arden Key, but hilarious nonetheless. What
up? Okay. So you think Harrell at this point should be on the depth chart a starter?
Yeah. If Arden Key is not listed as the starter because of the pending suspension, I think that week one, if the Key suspension holds, week one, Jalen Harrell will be starting out opposite of Harold Landry on the outside. But I'll also say this. I've been asking the Titans to make a signing there, whether it be Carl Lawson, whether I wanted Emmanuel Ogbah before he went to the Dolphins. I'm not as high on Yannick Ngakoue. I think he's kind of a selfish pass rusher, and that's why he has 10 sacks a year and can't find a spot on a team because people know he's just a selfish player. But at this point, he could replace Arden Key's skill set at minimum and help them pass rush on third down. So I think the Titans could, that's another spot like interior defensive line. I could see the Titans adding some more pieces before the regular season.
Inside, you've got Kenneth Murray trying to find a new home. And it seems most of his better numbers appear to be and his only good numbers, I should say, appear to be that as a blitzer. Other than that, there's not much there as a first-round draft pick. So maybe a new scene, new scheme and all that. Gray was a fourth-round draft pick. And then, of course, Gibbons might be, and I'm not saying he's a star, but Gibbons is probably one of the more underrated players. I mean, he's a solid player. And
he's a solid player.
And not that many people know about him. So eventually he'll be replaced at some point in time. But Cedric Gray, I mean, I'm a Cedric Gray fan. I really like Cedric Gray in the draft. I thought that he was going to be a really good player. I'm not sure what kind of camp he's had, but what's it look like inside?
Well, he's a little bit of a slow burn for Cedric Gray, and he banged up his shoulder recently, so he didn't get to play on Saturday night. He was out of camp practices at the end of last week, but he's expected to come back soon. It's nothing major or anything like that. But again, I think this is a big weakness for the Titans. This is an area where they could stand to improve for certain. Now, my football philosophy, just as a roster builder, linebacker is like the running back of defense to me. I think that you can get away with maybe not spending a bunch of resources at inside linebacker. Yeah. You have a good pass rush and a good secondary. I think that'll kind of carry the day for you. But Kenneth Murray's looked good so far. Here's what I will say about Kenneth Murray. He's the coolest looking linebacker the Titans have had in a minute. Like, he just looks cool. He's ripped up, got his jersey tucked up, showing his six-pack abs, got the arm sleeve on, just has a look to him. He looks like an awesome linebacker. But the question's going to be, can he hold up in pass coverage? Will he have better awareness in his pass drops than he had? Now, the Titans' defensive scheme is going to be way different than what he ran when he was with the Chargers. It was more of a read and react system with the Chargers, where the Titans don't want you to read and react. They just want you to get downhill. Right now, you're going to be blitzing up the middle. You're going to be going downhill as a hammerhead shark, being a take-on guy. So I think he's going to fit better in the Titans' defense. But, you know, Jack Gibbons is just a borderline starter in the NFL. I don't think that he's a confirmed starter. I think Gibbons' better role would be like a third linebacker on a team, like your primary backup there. So the Titans are hoping that when Cedric Gray comes back, maybe he can take steps. Otis Reese is a second-year player with a ton of talent. He's kind of a converted safety with good speed and ferociousness. James Williams out of Miami is a 7th-round pick. Very similar. Out of the top 5 defensive grades for the Titans on Saturday night, 4 of them were those linebackers. Murray, Chance Campbell, Otis Reese, and James Williams. So the linebacker spot is going to be something that takes advantage of the new defensive scheme, but I don't think there's a ton of great talent there. And I think the Titans are just kind of hoping that these pieces fit better in their defense than they fit in other places.
And then the secondary, so Awuzie, he comes over. Diggs is new, of course. And then Snead, the big prize. So this is a lot of newness here, including, of course, Brownlee as a draft pick. How's it all looking with some of the, pretty decent holdovers, including McCreary? So this looks like a much more improved secondary.
It absolutely does. Now, I would tell you this. We haven't got to see it a ton. So L'Jarius Sneed has basically, the way I would put it is he has a degenerative knee. And in Kansas City, he barely practiced ever. They like, he didn't participate in training camp. He barely practiced through the week. They just said, Sneed, play on game day. That's all we need. And he basically played like 100% of the snaps for Kansas City last year. So he could play, but the Titans have been using the same exact management plan that they used for him in Kansas City. And that means he doesn't practice a lot in training camp. So it's not, and then Awuzie got hurt last week or 2 weeks ago, and he was expected to be out for 3 to 4 weeks. So we haven't got to see like the full secondary. Quandre Diggs hasn't practiced in anything like full speed yet, really, just kind of walk through stuff because he's so new. So we haven't got to see this remade secondary in totality in any action that actually matters. But I think we know what we're going to get from some of these veteran players who have been in the league for quite some time. And it should be a lot better than what the Titans had in recent years. So I don't have a lot to say on that because we haven't got to see it a ton, but just the collection of names and what these players have accomplished before, it should give the Titans a majorly improved secondary again compared to what they've had in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even mention Jamal Adams. So
right. And when he was signed, I wasn't super high on the signing because to me, I'm like, you're signing Jamal Adams, and he's more of a linebacker. He's more of a defensive end than he is a safety at this stage. He cannot cover a traffic cone. Like, this guy cannot cover anyone. So what are we doing? Like, the Titans need another safety, but they need a safety, not a linebacker. Well, then they eventually bring in Quandre Diggs, who can be that other coverage safety. And now you can use Jamal Adams, that dime package linebacker. Use him as an early down slot guy against the run, against heavier formations. So now that the Titans have brought in Quandre Diggs, I feel a lot better about the Jamal Adams signing. And I think they've added the right depth at safety that they needed to, looking at the status of that group last time that we talked.
Yeah, and because those two guys played together, so that is also
they're
going
best
to be
friends
important.
too, like very best friends. And the Titans play the Seattle Seahawks in joint practices this week leading up to the preseason game. So already I planned on one of my shows this week. I'm going to call it a revenge game for those guys. Right. So they're expected to be back out at practice to where neither of those guys practiced last week. So excited to see what they can do now being back out on the field against their old team.
And speaking of injuries with the Awuzie, of course, speculation that big ACL injury he had a couple of years slowed him down. So any injury that he partakes in right now is definitely going to be questionable. We're going to have to keep an eye on him.
For sure.
If something happens to one of those corners, who do you think is the first guy in? Because Garrer, is that how you pronounce his name, Garrer?
Yeah.
He seemed to play a lot for an undrafted rookie last year. And then you bring in Brownlee. So I know Avery's numbers are pretty weak. Fairley, I just can't believe the whole story with Fairley. Just his bio and the injuries. I mean, that kid has been through so much. So talk about, what kind of depth you have there at corner.
This is an easy answer, to be honest with you. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., the 5th-round rookie, is going to be a steal. He is going to be a starting level player for the Titans, maybe right away. He's been impressive in camp. He is like a L'Jarius Sneed clone. He is physical, feisty, press you at the line of scrimmage. He made a really good play on Saturday night where he kind of got beat deep behind him, but he has great closing speed. He has good, like the game goes slow for him, and it allows him to make plays on the ball. Anybody who's played football or played in the defensive backfield knows as a DB, the idea is you punch through the catch triangle. You got your hands here, the triangle. You got to punch through that to dislodge the ball. That's the best way to do it. And he was a little behind the receiver, but he got in there, punched his red glove right through the catch triangle and knocked the pass away, even though the guy technically had beat him. And he's gotten rave reviews throughout camp. He was a guy who was super upset that he got drafted as late as he got drafted. Like, he's talked about it. He was extremely upset at first. He wasn't even happy about being drafted because he was so upset. He thought he would go in the 3rd round. He drops to the 5th. And I think the Titans are going to benefit. I think that Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is a guy who could come in right away and be a starter for a Woozy if the injury doesn't heal as quickly. And if he just stays in his depth role as the CB4, I think the Titans are in a great spot at cornerback. I really do think they got a player in Jarvis Brownlee Jr. Now, I will say, Caleb Farley, 3 weeks with a hamstring right now. He's hurt again. I feel so poorly for the guy. Everything in his life, mom dies from cancer, house explodes, killing his father. Like, what a nightmare for that guy. Not to mention his career going down the toilet because of all the injuries. He can't even get on the field and prove it and get better because he's just always hurt. Unfortunately, some people's bodies aren't made for professional football. And it looks like that's the case with Farley. I'm not rooting for anybody more than I'm rooting for Caleb Farley, but it's just not going to happen for him. By the time that he comes back from his injury, he'll probably be cut from the team. So It's unfortunate. But the other guy I would point out is Gabe Judy Lawley, the undrafted free agent out of Tennessee. I think he's kind of on that roster bubble, but he's had some good moments in practice. He got an interception last week in practice. I think he's somebody that the Titans may say, hey, rather than having Trey Avery back again, who just consistently gets roasted every time he's on the field, he got cooked again on Saturday night by San Francisco's backups. Why would we bring Trey Avery back when we know what he is in a 3rd year? Why wouldn't we just take a chance on Gabe Judy Lawley, a younger player, and see what we can make him into? So that's what I would do, but I'm really excited about Jarvis Brownlee Jr., whether he has to start or not.
And then quickly on special teams. So Falk, Father Time will eventually catch up with him, but he just seems to still, be a steady presence there, which is going to be important on a young football team if all goes well for him again this season. Stonehouse. What's the latest there? Because he seemed to play well as a rookie, had the injury last year. Do you think he's ready to kind of pick up where he left off as a rookie?
He's been punting in practice. They didn't put him out there on Saturday night. They don't want him taking live reps yet, but he's been punting in practice and simulated rushes and stuff like that. So I think he will be ready for the season. But, at the end of the day, he's a kicker. He's a punter, but he kicks the football. He's not a guy who is used to getting hit. And it basically what I'm saying is it may be more of a mental hurdle for him than it would be other NFL players who are more, regular football players. I think, for a guy like Stonehouse, he's not small, but he's just, you wouldn't look at him and be like, oh, that guy's a professional football player. He's a punter. So I think that he'll be back and ready for week 1. But they definitely got to test him out there in the preseason if they want to feel comfortable with it. But so far, so good after just a brutal injury last year because the Titans' previous special teams coordinator truly was a moron. Like, there's no other way around it. The Colts ran the same punt block play 2 times in a row and blocked the punt twice, with the second one being the one that Stonehouse basically snapped his leg and tore his ACL on. So I think he'll be back. I think he'll be fine. He was a weapon for the Titans when he was good. He's one of the best top 3 punters in the NFL when he's healthy. So I think he'll be all right.
All right. And overall special teams, how was it last year?
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. The Titans have been a bad special teams unit for basically the entire tenure of Mike Vrabel's time there. A few blips on the radar where they looked okay, but Craig Aukerman was one of the worst coaches in the NFL. It's really a travesty that Mike Vrabel was so blindly loyal to him for 7 seasons. And it ultimately cost the Titans one of the best punters in the league last year. And again, another reason I'm so thankful that the Titans made the hard choice and got rid of Mike Vrabel. He was bringing the team down, wasn't developing the young players, far too loyal to his position coaches and his veteran players. There are just so many, whether it's statistical or anecdotal, so many examples of Mike Vrabel hurting his football team. And people who don't cover the Titans on a day-to-day basis don't realize it or know it or care, quite honestly. They're just, Mike Vrabel, that's a good coach. Yeah, he's a good coach, but he's not the great coach that people act like. And he hurt the team over the last few seasons. So very happy to see this new coaching staff and what they can do going forward with Brian Callahan at the helm.
Yes, I think he's one of those, obviously he's like an old school guy, and it's just one of those guys, though, that coaches that needs to be with the right foundation, the right organization. The general manager and the head coach, they're together. They have a philosophy. That might work. It's just the way the Titans organization is right now. Again, the whole rebuilding, like you were saying, they need to trust the young kids. It's all about rebuilding and developing.
Yeah, he did not want to do that.
No.
Yeah, I compare it to, Mike Vrabel is a guy who needs to take over like a ready-made team that's ready to win. I thought he would have been a good fit with the Chargers. I thought he would have been a good fit with the Falcons this year. He can take a veteran team who knows what to do and pilot the ship, the ship to a place it needs to go. But he's not going to take young players and make them grow. You know what I mean? So I kept saying, it's not that he's a bad coach. Mike Vrabel is a good football coach, but he wasn't the right coach for the Titans. And I think they did hire the right coach in Brian Callahan.
Tyler, great job. I really appreciate this, getting to hone in on my Tennessee Titans knowledge, and which I have been. So I appreciate that. You've got the Locked On Titans podcast, which is how often? Can you check that out?
Daily. It's Monday through Friday, every day. But I mean, last week I did 9 episodes, not just 5. So I'm the hardest working man in show business. Okay. Every day, double episodes with the film channel at Tic Tac Titans over there. I'm always putting out film videos too. So, I may not be the most talented guy in the world. I don't have the college degree and blah, 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 but I won't be outworked. Okay. Mamba mentality.
There you go, Tyler. Great job. Thank you. We'll talk to you during the season, hopefully.
Yep. Thanks so much, Greg. Look forward to it.
You got it. We'll look out for you there on the podcast, and also want to remind everybody to subscribe and check back with us when we talk college football tomorrow. We've got some college football interviews, a couple of Big Ten teams, Ohio State and Oregon. We're going to be talking about.
Go Bucks, baby. Go Buckeyes. Right. Let's go. O-H-I-O.
Okay. Very nice. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I see it. I got my puke bag next to me, ready to go.
Yeah, well, here. That tide might start to be. This might be the year it kind of turns back again. It's very possible.
Yeah, because the cheater left. That's why the guy who cheated for 4 years to win. Now he's gone because he can't get in trouble anymore. So he's like, yeah, I cheated. So what? And he's out of there. So yeah, well, hopefully it turns back because I'm about sick of losing to Michigan personally.
Well, is Tennessee play the Chargers this year?
Yes, I do believe they do. They do play the Chargers, so that'll be an interesting matchup.
You'll be looking forward to that one then. I'm sure.
Right.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks everybody for checking us out here, and we'll see you next time on the Ourlads Football Network.